The pitching staff for the Atlanta Braves gets a little bit clearer after they trade Ian Anderson to the Angels for Jose Suarez. We'll break down everything in that deal and more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at shortstopball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves and on Instagram at Locked On Braves. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the trade sending Ian Anderson to the Angels for Jose Suarez, what that means for the rotation, what it means for the bullpen. Do I like this move at all? Not really. But what else were you going to do with Ian Anderson if he wasn't going to be on the roster? Again, we'll break all of that down on today's episode. Also, what I wanted to get into today before the trade broke is who will be the top prospect for the Atlanta Braves at the end of 2025. We'll see if we have time to get into all of that, as we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about this trade of Ian Anderson. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, like I said, I really want to break down this Ian Anderson trade because came out of nowhere. He had pretty much just finished pitching a game for the Atlanta Braves on Sunday afternoon. And, kind of the same Ian in that there was some stuff that I liked from him. There was some stuff that obviously I didn't like, falling behind in counts, having to come over the middle of the plate where his stuff just isn't good enough to get hitters out. Certainly not the fastball. But the Braves decide to trade Ian Anderson to the Atlanta West Braves and the Angels. It seems like everybody's going to the Angels from the Braves, and they're making all types of deals together. But he goes to the Angels, and the Braves get back Jose Suarez. We'll talk more about Suarez in a minute, but I want to speak on Ian Anderson here and just what it means, what the Braves trading him, and what has led to this outcome for the Atlanta Braves. And you look at what he's done so far in spring training. It's 20 innings pitched. It's only 8 hits allowed. He hasn't been hit, but it's 20 walks. And it's just, you cannot survive like that. Now, he has in spring training only 5 earned runs allowed in those 20 innings pitched, only 10 strikeouts. So not getting a lot of strikeouts. It's some really good batted ball luck. And I think part of that is due to his profile. You're getting hitters on top of that changeup, and he's getting a lot of ground balls and some easy outs. And to his credit, I think that can be a good part of his game. But you can't, again, and I've said this all spring training, you can't continue to walk a batter an inning and get away with that when you're facing a big league lineup 2-3 times through the order. And that was the problem with Ian Anderson, back in the day, is that he couldn't get through a lineup 2 or 3 times. One, because his pitch count was too high. And 2, I think hitters were just figuring him out the more they got to face him. I think that's why he struggled so much in 2022. It's not necessarily that his stuff got worse. It's that hitters started to figure him out. If you wait this guy out, make him come into the middle of the plate, then you can hit him, because that changeup is a pitch you want out of the zone. And if you can just lay off of that and sit on that 4-seamer, then you can crush Ian Anderson. And it really became that simple. And I think when hitters started to make that adjustment to him, and that's when you saw Ian Anderson get demoted. Look, we all think Ian Anderson, coming back, it was just due to the injury. He got demoted before the injury took place. He got demoted to AAA because he was pitching awfully at the major league level. And then he got injured. So it's not like it's just a guy who was pitching great. He got injured, had to have Tommy John out for 1.5 years or 2. And he's just coming back and trying to get to that level. The level he was at before injury was he was a really bad pitcher. And so I think we all have to remember that. And the Braves, and remember this too, the Braves didn't trust Ian Anderson enough at the end of last year to give him a start at the big league level when they could have used another starter. And the numbers were okay at AAA. There were still those walks, but again, wasn't giving up a lot of runs. And the Braves didn't give him a chance at the end of last season. The Braves went with A.J. Smith-Shawver in the wild card round over Ian Anderson. And you can debate whether or not you want if that was the right decision or not, especially in hindsight. But that's how the Braves felt about it, that they weren't willing to give Ian Anderson a shot at the end of last year when the Braves could have used a starter, and they weren't willing to start him in a wild card game despite all of his postseason success. And they went with a very young pitcher in AJ Smith-Shawver. And on top of that, as I mentioned a minute ago, Ian was demoted in 2022 because he was pitching badly. So clearly the Braves do not trust Ian Anderson. They didn't trust him enough to at least give him a shot to begin the year. They didn't see the improvements that they needed to see from him coming back to injury. They weren't going to put him on this roster, so they were going to have to DFA him anyway. And so they trade him for Jose Suarez. I wish it was for Ranger Suarez. And similar to Soroka, the Braves just aren't at a point where you can allow Ian Anderson to figure this out at the big league level. Like maybe the Braves could have unlocked Soroka similar to what the White Sox did and putting him in the bullpen, letting him kind of figure things out there and move him back to the rotation. But the Braves couldn't afford to do that. Every game matters for an Atlanta Braves team that is trying to get to the postseason, win a division. You don't have the time for Ian Anderson to figure that out at the big league level. And I think that plays a large part into why the Braves moved on. See David Thatcher saying the Braves should have kept Soroka instead, but it's the same thing. When the Braves gave Soroka a chance 2 years ago, he came up, he'd have a bad start or two. I don't think he ever got more than 2 starts in a row at the big league level, but the Braves just could not afford to allow him to have a 5-start stretch because they're trying to win every single game. And they couldn't afford to put Soroka on the roster going into last year because you just didn't know what you were going to get out of him. And it's the same situation here with Ian Anderson. Yeah, maybe you could put him in there. Maybe you could put Ian Anderson in the bullpen, hope that he can give you something there and figure it out and put him in the rotation. But again, just based on the history that I just gave you, the Braves don't trust Ian Anderson, and they don't think he's going to figure this out. And so they would rather just deal him away and get something for him, which I'm going to argue, I don't really know what they got for him. And it's not like Ian Anderson's value isn't at a point where you were going to get a great return for him. But it felt like a swap of just bad pitchers. And I think if that were the case, and it clearly was, I think I would have rather just kept Ian Anderson and put him in the bullpen and let him be your long reliever until somebody better comes along and then just DFA him at that point. I mean, if you were basically just going to swap him for another bad pitcher, I would have rather just stuck with Ian Anderson. But somebody else mentioned Soroka, and I've talked about it. It's crazy how quickly things can change in baseball, especially for pitchers. I mean, you're talking about 3-4 years ago, Mike Soroka and Ian Anderson looking like top of the rotation pitchers for a long time in this rotation. And now they're both out of the organization. And for the most part, they're both non-factors, although maybe Soroka has a little bit of resurgence as a starter as he's swapped up his pitch mix there. And maybe Ian Anderson figures it out. But it speaks to the fact of things change so quickly in Major League Baseball for pitchers. And that's why you're not going to see Alex Anthopoulos go out and sign free agent starters. Just because things can change so quickly and they can fall off so quickly, whether from injuries or hitters just figuring them out and making adjustments. But it's sad because I was really excited about both of those guys. I can remember going to the minor league level to see Ian Anderson pitch and him looking really good. We obviously all remember the 2021 World Series where he threw 5 no-hit innings and how big he was in the postseason for the Atlanta Braves. But those days are long gone now. And at this present point, neither Ian Anderson nor Michael Soroka are good enough to be on this roster, or at least shouldn't be. We'll talk more about the back end of this rotation now in the bullpen and whether or not you really trust any of these arms. But I think the bottom line for me in seeing this deal of the Braves basically giving up and giving away Ian Anderson and just how we've seen things play out over the last couple of years, the Braves just don't trust Ian Anderson. They don't trust where he is now as a pitcher, and they don't trust that he's going to figure it out. And so they were willing to give up on him, and even getting somebody that I think is just as bad as Ian Anderson. And we'll talk more about that on the other side, what the Braves got in return and what this means for the final spot in the rotation, what it means for the final spot in the bullpen, as Suarez guaranteed a spot in that bullpen. We'll talk about that here next. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. Whether you're recovering after a workout or need an energy boost, their grass-fed whey protein and pre-workout deliver real results. I can speak to this myself as they sent me over a sample product of it. It's been great. My wife's been using it as well. She absolutely loves it. And as you can see, I'm bulking up a little bit in the shoulder area right here, getting ready for summer and the beach trip coming up. So Just Ingredients, make sure that you check them out. Visit justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me on today's live episode of Locked On Braves, or whether you're watching the replay, doing a little bit of a different podcast on Sunday afternoon, getting stuff in early in the week, because I will be out of town on opening day a weekend, but looking forward to getting things underway. I will have a lot of content on the podcast this week, special guests coming on, all of that. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves or wherever you get your podcast, and make sure after you're done listening here that you go give Locked On MLB your second listen of the day, solely getting you ready for opening day as well. Let's jump back into the conversation, though, on this trade of Ian Anderson for Jose Suarez. Just running down Suarez really quickly. Suarez, 27-year-old left-handed pitcher. He is also out of options. Career 5.47 ERA, 1.47 whip, 8.27 K per nine, 3.68 walk per nine. Last year in 22 games, he started 3 games, a 6.02 ERA, a 1.61 whip, 52 and a third innings pitched, a 9.63 K per nine, and a 4.64 walk per nine. So you saw in the move to the bullpen for Suarez, strikeouts jumped up, but so did the walks. Left-handed batters have an OPS of 771 against him compared to 832 for righties. So one of my initial thoughts when I saw this move was, okay, Suarez is a lefty. That makes sense. It gives you a swing man in the bullpen who can also start, but is also a lefty. So it gives you a third lefty in the bullpen. Maybe that's why the Braves targeted Suarez here. But lefties have hit him pretty well in his career too. So I don't think that's really going to be too much of a factor. Only thing I can figure here is that Suarez has already kind of made that transition to be a swing man who can give you some bulk innings, can start a game for you if he needs to, and because he is a lefty, like I said, I just gave you the numbers. It's not like he's held down lefties in his career, but he is another lefty in the bullpen. Again, I said this earlier in the first segment. I really don't get this. I know you couldn't expect much value for Ian Anderson. You were either going to have to DFA him and get nothing, or trade him now and hope that you get something. But the something that you got, I just don't know that it's much better than the something that you traded. And I think I would have much rather just hung on to Ian Anderson, put him in that swingman bullpen role, see what he can do in that role, and just hang around for depth. And whenever Strider comes back or, somebody else emerges, you just don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks either. And I think I'd rather have an Ian Anderson who you have stretched out, at least doesn't give up a lot of hits. Maybe he's not going to throw 6-7 innings, but could he give you 4 or 5 innings of 2 earned or less? And you piece it together from there. Instead, you get a guy in Suarez who, look, he can start for you, but he's been pretty bad in that role. He could go to the bullpen for you. I don't understand. I don't understand the move at all unless the Braves just really, really don't like Ian Anderson. I don't mean don't like him in the terms of the person that he is, but they just really don't like or believe in the fact that Ian Anderson could give you much of anything. Because I don't know that Suarez gives you much of anything. I don't know if Suarez is any better than Jose Chavez, who the Braves just picked up. We'll talk about that in a second too. I don't understand the move. I think I'd prefer you just hang on to Ian Anderson and put him in the bullpen and have that depth in the rotation if needed. And then if somebody else emerges and you need to cut them, then you cut them and you just kind of live with that. Again, it's not like you're going to get a ton of value for Ian Anderson. I understand that, but I just, what you did get back, I think is just as bad, if not worse than what you had in Ian Anderson. They're both out of options. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like I said, I know you're either going to get nothing for him by DFAing or you try to get something, but I still think you got nothing in the end. I think you still have a guy in Suarez that there's a good chance that you just DFA him before too long. So I don't like the move. I don't like the trade. Again, not that I'm a big believer. I've been as hard as anybody on Ian Anderson in spring training, but I just don't think, I think I would have rather just seen what you could get out of him than trade him for a guy like Jose Suarez, who again has been just as bad. Now you want to look at 21 and 22 for Jose Suarez. Those were decent years, a 3.75 ERA, a 3.96 ERA. The most innings he's thrown in a season, 109 back in 2022, at least at the big league level. Obviously combined, he's thrown more than that. But the last 2 years have been pretty dreadful. An 8.29 ERA in 2023. And then I gave you the numbers for last year, a 6.02 ERA. Last year was the first season that he really transitioned mostly to the bullpen. But I got to think, with him being out of options, he's going to get that role and that swingman role in the back of the bullpen. Otherwise, why would you not just DFA Ian Anderson? Why would you trade him for a guy that you're just going to DFA anyway? So I think he's going to get that final spot in the bullpen. And I was looking up his numbers really quickly for the starter versus reliever. Again, he only made 3 starts last year. So, most of his overall stats do come from being a reliever. He was actually better in a smaller sample size as a starter last year. 4.97 ERA in those 3 starts with a 6.35 ERA in the bullpen, 39 and 2/3 innings out of the bullpen last year, 43 strikeouts, but a 1.639 whip. So it doesn't give me a lot of hope, a lot of excitement for Suarez. But let me know what you think. Obviously, I think I think it's in the end, I think it's a non-factor move because I think Suarez is going to end up getting DFA'd anyway. But again, just to kind of reiterate my thoughts on it, there's more news coming in here, and that's kind of why I'm hesitating a little bit as we go through this. Justin Toscano, or actually the Braves, are reporting that they acquired Jose Suarez from the Los Angeles Angels in exchange for Ian Anderson. So there's the trade. And the Braves also optioned Bryce Elder to Gwinnett and reassigned Jose Chavez, Craig Kimbrell, and James McCann to minor league camp. So that means officially now AJ Smith-Shawver has made the opening day rotation. I think we all kind of saw that coming and knew that that was going to be the case, that AJ Smith-Shawver would be in the rotation over Ian Anderson when he was with the team. But obviously after the trade, it became more apparent. And with Jose Chavez being reassigned, Bryce Elder being optioned back, again, it seems like Suarez is going to, by default, get this final bullpen spot. And I just don't know that I agree with that or love that, but at the end of the day, it is your final bullpen spot. And it's a guy that's going to come in mop-up duty situations, garbage time situations to try to fill a gap for you, which is what Jose Chavez would have done in that role, what Ian Anderson would have done in that role. So at the end of the day, it's not like Suarez is coming over to be somebody that's going to pitch in close ball games for you. I just think you could have let Ian Anderson do that. You could have, I think, even let Jose Chavez do that. I know he didn't look fantastic on Sunday, but obviously a whirlwind for him just coming over and basically getting a one-day audition. Now, this is great for looking on the positive side here. A great chance for AJ Smith-Shawver to be in the rotation to begin the season. Hopefully he gets off to a good start and can, we'll see what happens when Strider comes back. But we'll see, what AJ Smith-Shawver looks like. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. What this means for the rotation, what it means for AJ Smith-Shawver, what it means for the bullpen going forward. Now, do we have everything complete at this point and know who's going to be on the roster? We'll wrap things up talking about that here next. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you got your eye on a few underdogs this year, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. If you want to go out there and check out the odds for the upcoming Major League Baseball season, they have World Series odds out there, division winner odds, all types of odds that you want to see if you're just curious on who the favorites are going into the season. Awards odds out there, who's the favorite to win the NL Cy Young, how far up is Chris Sale, and that I haven't looked in a couple days. Last time he was top 6 in there. So you can check all that out at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to make sure you stay in control of the way you play. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So let's wrap up talking about the pitching situation and the overall roster as things stand. Less than a week before opening day. Opening day coming up this Thursday, obviously, in San Diego. We'll save the prospect talk for tomorrow's podcast, but I wanted to make sure we really discussed at length this Ian Anderson trade because there's a lot of dynamics to it. For one thing, it does solidify what the pitching rotation and bullpen is going to look like. It's going to be a rotation of Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Ronaldo Lopez, Grant Holmes, and AJ Smith-Shawver to begin the year. And actually, Mark Wellman reporting it's going to be Sale, Lopez, Schwellenbach, Holmes, and Smith-Shawver in that order. I thought maybe Schwellenbach will get the second start of the year, mainly because I think he's better than Lopez, and also because we just haven't seen a lot from Lopez. And maybe we don't have as much time to go in on this right now, but Lopez's velocity is kind of concerning in spring training. It is just spring training. Keep that in mind, but it's down a few ticks from where it was last year. So his first start in San Diego, going to be very interested to see what that velocity looks like, what he looks like, because it's why he hasn't, had an awful spring training. Certainly the velo being down is a bit of a concern for somebody that made the leap last year back from reliever to starter. He's coming to spring training. Look, pitching on backfields is nothing new for starters who are already going to be in the rotation, but I think it does raise some alarms with fans. But then when he does pitch and you see the velo down in spring training, again, not necessarily to a panic level, but eyebrows are raised a little bit for Ronaldo Lopez and what that looks like. But Mark Bowen reporting it will be Sale, Lopez, Schwellenbach, Holmes, and Smith-Shawver in that order to begin the year. And then in the bullpen, looking like Iglesias, Johnson, Bummer, and Lee are the guaranteed locks to be in the bullpen. Most likely also Daysbel Hernandez, but he does have an option if the Braves want to play with that. Hector Neris, De Los Santos, and now Suarez, who the Braves just traded for. So it looks like though that is going to be the pitching staff for the Atlanta Braves will begin the year. So again, I think you look at the offseason. Let's go back to the offseason for just a second because they didn't do enough. And I think we all agree on that. Just about everybody agrees with that. Braves didn't do enough to get more depth for the rotation and for the bullpen. And look, not everybody can have a 5 starters that you just absolutely love and believe in. But again, you could have signed Jose Quintana for $4.2 million. I didn't see what the Orioles paid for Kyle Gibson, but I'm assuming it wasn't a lot. You could have gotten a Kyle Gibson. You could have gotten pretty cheap depth this offseason, and you didn't. And look at David Robertson still out there. There are bullpen arms you could have gotten pretty cheap this offseason so that we're not sitting here deciding between an AJ Smith-Shawver, who I'm very excited about, but I think there's still some growing pains for AJ Smith-Shawver, some things that he needs to work through. I'm very excited about this season for AJ Smith-Shawver, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I absolutely trust him in LA to begin the year. We're not sitting here deciding between a Jose Suarez and an Ian Anderson and a Bryce Elder and, hoping that Hector Neris and Craig Kimbrell figure it out. You didn't have to put yourself in this situation, and that's on the front office, just not simply doing enough, that you're having to, that these are your options for the back of the rotation and for the bullpen. Because to be clear, whether it was going to be Ian Anderson or Bryce Elder, or it is AJ Smith-Shawver, or whether it's going to be Jose Suarez, these are not great options. And again, it's your last spot in your rotation. It's your last spot in your bullpen. Most teams don't have great options for those spots, but I feel like the Braves could have had better options than they did. And this isn't me, again, going in on AJ Smith-Shawver, who I love, but would I feel more comfortable with a Jose Quintana in my rotation to begin the year? Yes. I think AJ Smith-Shawver could be better, and I think probably is better stuff-wise, but I trust Jose Quintana more than I do in AJ Smith-Shawver right now. And I know I've said Quintana's name a million times this offseason. It's not that I'm in love with him. I'm just making the point that you could have done more for cheap this offseason to give you more reliable depth than what you currently have. And it's put you in a situation where you're trading an Ian Anderson for a Jose Suarez. You're trading a bad pitcher for a bad pitcher. And that's what the result of this offseason has been for the Atlanta Braves. And, I see somebody saying they should have called up the Mariners for Wu or Miller. I'm not even saying, again, the point I've had all offseason, you didn't have to go sign Corbin Burns. You didn't have to bring back Max Fried. But you did have to go get a Kyle Gibson. You did have to go get a Jose Quintana. You did have to go get some quality depth for your rotation to hold things together until Strider's back, or best case scenario, you're able to run a 6-man rotation and keep these guys fresh all year long. And you failed to do that. And I think it's really hurting the Braves at this point, that you're deciding against a bunch of arms that I just honestly don't like and feel comfortable with. So I think this comes back to a failure of the offseason and just not doing enough pitching wise. And like I said earlier, I get it. It's your fifth starter. It's your eighth man in the bullpen. But what happens when one of your top 4 starters gets hurt? What happens when one of your top bullpen arms gets hurt? Then all of a sudden, this guy that we're talking about now that we don't really like and feel comfortable about, now they're your 7th bullpen guy. Now they're your 4th guy in the rotation. And that's what happens when you don't get enough quality depth, is that when the depth that you do have gets cut away, now all of a sudden you're relying on those guys who you thought maybe were just going to be your last guy in the rotation, your last guy in the bullpen. Now they're being elevated to a point that you really don't feel comfortable with. And again, I think that all goes back to the front office and just not doing enough in the offseason to prepare for this scenario. But at the end of the day, look, if Sale is healthy, Strider, Lopez, Schwellenbach, it's one of the best in Strider, obviously, it's one of the best rotations in baseball. And Holmes, I think I said Strider twice, but Holmes even, I think if he solidifies himself, but it's hoping that those 4 or 5 are healthy all year long, because the depth behind them is not great. It's really, you're putting a lot of stock in AJ Smith-Shawver, who's still just 22 years old. And that's a lot to put on him. I feel like a lot's been put on AJ Smith-Shawver since he's become an Atlanta Brave. And you're putting a lot on him again. And look, I think the bullpen could be okay if, Iglesias is nails again, if Pierce Johnson can handle the setup role that Joe Jimenez and AJ Minter have handled for so long, if Days will take the step up, if Bummer can have some good batted ball luck. That's asking a lot. This goes back to the conversation that we had with Justin Toscano last week. You're asking a lot of those relievers to step into roles that they haven't had to feel, and you don't know. They've been good relievers, yes, but they haven't been in these roles that they're in now. And what if they can't figure it out? What if they can't handle those roles? What if one of them gets hurt and all of a sudden you're asking Craig Kimbrell to pitch a big game for you in a 1-run game in Philadelphia in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning? You're asking Hector Neris to get back to where he was before 2024, which could happen. You're putting a lot of faith in unknowns in the pitching staff. And I think that's a very scary place to be right now for the Atlanta Braves. Again, could work out, and this is all meaningless, but I don't think the front office did itself enough favors to put them in the best position going into the season. So I hate to be kind of on a down note going into opening day, because I am very excited about this team. I think they're going to win a lot of baseball games and be very, very good. Let me be clear on that. But I don't like the trade, this Ian Anderson for Jose Suarez trade. I don't love it. And I just don't love, even if Ian Anderson was here, I'd be saying the same things. So it's not necessarily the trade that I'm aggravated. Upset's not even the right word. Because like I said, I think this team's still going to be very good. But I think it all just goes back to the frustration of the offseason and not doing enough to give yourself that quality depth in the pitching staff. And you're already seeing the strains of that. And like I said, it's only going to take one or two more pitcher injuries, and you're going to really be struggling because that depth is going to be elevated. What you do, I love the depth on the offensive side of things. You want to end on a somewhat of a high note there. I love the depth they brought in the offensive side of things with a Brian De La Cruz, an Alex Verdugo, a Nick Allen, a Garrett Cooper, all the catchers that they brought in. I think they've done a fantastic job of adding depth to the position player side of things. Maybe that's an overreaction to what happened to the position players last year, but you didn't do nearly enough of that on the pitching side of things. So again, I hate to be kind of a downer on this. It's just, I really wish Ian Anderson could have figured it out. I don't think Jose Suarez is any better. And I'm really worried about the depth of the Braves pitching staff, both in the rotation and in the bullpen. I think they're just an injury or two away from the pitching staff looking kind of rough. Strider comes back. That's going to help a lot. And hopefully that is pretty soon. But even then, you're putting a lot of faith in some unknowns in the pitching staff this year, especially in the bullpen. And that will do it for this episode, though, of Locked On Braves. I thank you so much for joining. I got Braves Thrills in here, Sir Kisling. We're almost up to 300 live. Mass Booze, Docs Cards. Thank you all for joining me on a Sunday afternoon live. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of Locked On Braves. Let me know you agree, disagree. Again, at the end of the day, I think this Ian Anderson, Jose Suarez move is a non-factor, because I would not be surprised if Suarez is DFA'd by the time Strider comes back, and you were probably just going to have to DFA Ian Anderson anyway. But my overall point to this, just to wrap it up one more time, is just that the lack of moves in the offseason to prepare for this, to prepare for what if Ian Anderson doesn't figure it out, to prepare for what if Anderson PR doesn't piece it together and win the job in spring training. I don't think enough was done to build in those insurances. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already, and leave me a comment down below. We'll be back again. A lot of content coming your way this week. I know I teased talking about the top prospect at the end of 2025. We'll get to that on tomorrow's episode. Much more coming your way. We got an NL East preview roundtable coming up on Monday as well that will be posted. Got a crossover episode with Javi of Locked On Padres later in the week, previewing that series. So a lot coming your way on Locked On Braves. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.